Well, I'm Laura Belin. Most people know me as Lori, or my former blog handle, Des Moines Dem, that I used to publish under. I spend a lot of my time writing a website about Iowa politics called Bleeding Heartland. I actually didn't create the website. Drew Miller and Chris Woods, who were college students at the time, they wanted a community-based political blog for Iowa. They each had their own separate blog, and they started the website in January of 2007, and I joined a few months later as someone writing on the front page. I was, I think, registered user number 9 at Bleeding Heartland. I was active already on Iowa and national political blogs. He invited me to do more regular posting at Bleeding Heartland. So I've been doing this. I started in 2007. Now that my kids are older, I've been devoting increasingly, especially in the last 6 or 8 years, more and more time to writing. So I would say I spend probably full-time or more hours in any given week, and I am very pleased that not only do we publish a lot of work that I've written, but more than 100 guest authors have contributed this year. It could be by the end of the year closer to 200 actually, and so I edit all of those guest submissions as well. So I'm really pleased to showcase a diverse group of voices from Iowa writing about all kinds of political issues of state, local, or national importance in Iowa that otherwise I don't feel are getting the coverage they deserve. I love writing. I love writing about politics. I used to have my previous job for about 10 years. I worked in the field of covering Russian politics. I started that when Boris Yeltsin was president of Russia, and so covered the later Yeltsin years and the early years of Vladimir Putin's presidency closely. And as politics in Russia changed, the issues that I really enjoyed covering were campaigns and elections, parliamentary politics, media issues, and those became much less open and much less interesting in Russia. So once I stopped doing that, I took some time off from writing. But when I was interested in getting back into writing, I'm living here now, and Iowa politics is really more interesting than Russian politics. So I have no word limits. I'm able to control my editorial decisions, and I can go as in-depth as I want to. So I love, again, campaigns and elections, legislative politics, state government. I'm interested in local government issues as well. And so I love having that freedom to pursue stories that, again, aren't getting the attention that they probably deserve. Newspapers and newsrooms have really suffered terrible staff cuts the last 10 or 15 years. So there are just fewer reporters covering politics, and especially when you talk about local government and state government. And it's not just in Iowa, it's a national trend. There are fewer than half as many reporters covering state capitals now as there used to be 15 years ago. So but it is an issue in Iowa. There are the Des Moines Register is just bare bones operation at this time. And a lot of the political reporting that does exist is understandably focused on the presidential campaign, and that's very important. But it means there are fewer people out there to dig into other stories. And this came up, I was speaking with someone last year who had worked in news in the 1980s, and he was talking about how the Polk County supervisors used to have 2 or 3 reporters covered every Polk County Board of Supervisors meeting, and they were fighting each other for scoops, and they were closely following what the board was doing. Well, Polk County is even much larger now, by far the largest population county in Iowa. 1/6 of Iowans live here, and the average Polk County Supervisors meeting, there's not a single reporter there following what's going on. There's just almost no oversight of what government is doing. So because my readers are deeply, deeply interested in Iowa politics, I can just go more into stories than a newspaper. A newspaper would not cover a state legislative race in the kind of depth that I would cover it. And I enjoy that. And the people who really want to know about the campaigns and about what's happening, some of the legislative issues, I've written about some bills that didn't get a lot of attention. They maybe weren't the most important bills of the session, but they still affect a lot of people's lives. And it can be overwhelming when the legislature, especially toward the end of the session, they're passing so many bills in a short amount of time. So you just have to, the newspapers and the TV stations, they just have to pick 1 or 2 things.
Legislators can't even keep up with it.
That's right. A lot of legislators barely even know what they're voting on. And I've had people comment to me after I wrote something about a bill, like, well, I wish I had known some of that I voted for it, truly. And it's difficult when things come up so quickly. So I just enjoy bringing attention. On any given day, there are so many things I could write about, but I usually try to choose something that I know other Iowa news media either won't be covering or won't be covering in the kind of depth that I can cover. So, and one of the big reasons that I enjoy publishing guest authors' work is that other people are regularly bringing to my attention issues that I hadn't noticed, perspectives that I hadn't heard.
Where's the light?
We're in a discouraging place right now as a country and as a state. I mean, when I started at Bleeding Heartland in 2007, the Democrats controlled the governor's office and both chambers of the legislature, and that was unusual. That had never happened in my lifetime. I mean, it hadn't happened since the 1960s until after 2006 election, but it seemed like things were moving in a positive direction, and obviously we've gone way back the other way. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are wondering, is Iowa going to continue to head down the path toward like Kansas, or are we possibly going to start moving back like we saw Wisconsin starting to come back from the brink? And it's hard to say. Pennsylvania has started to move back, but Ohio is still Republican controlled entirely. Last year's election was really encouraging to me in that Democratic turnout was way, way up. And we really did. We won a lot of races. We won 2 congressional seats, obviously, that had been Republican held. And we were pretty close to getting the governor's office. I mean, I had worried prior to that, after the 2016 wipeout, I just thought, wow, we have no chance of winning the governor's race in 2018. And it was pretty close. So, and I think that 2020, I mean, Trump carried the state by a pretty big margin, and so you have to consider that he's probably favored to win again. But on the other hand, he's lost some ground here. His approval rating isn't what it used to be. So I think that the enthusiasm that I see among Democrats is very encouraging. I think what we just don't know is what the overall turnout is going to be. But it's, as state, I mean, I worry that Republicans are just digging us into such a deep hole right now that it's going to be really difficult, even if we can take back. The most urgent task is winning back the Iowa House in 2020. That's just essential. And starting to gain some ground in the Iowa Senate. And that's one reason at my website I've done a lot of race previews of Iowa House and legislative races that are likely to be competitive next year, and I have several more of those in progress now, in fact, because those, I think, are almost more important for the future of Iowa than whether Trump carries the state or by what margin Trump carries the state. But the congressional races and the Senate race against Joni Ernst I'll also be following really closely. But I think that we need to get people engaged in the state legislative races, because right now, to stop the bleeding, that's what we have to do right now, is just put some kind of check on Republican power at the state house. It's really discouraging, all of the things that they've done since 2017, including many that are widely known, like the collective bargaining bill, the workers' compensation bill, but then many that people are barely aware of that still affect a lot of Iowans. Like, we had a good foundation was built in the 2018 elections, and we're just going to have to keep building on that and keep getting those people out. I mean, one frustrating thing is there are a lot of factors that we can't control as progressives. And one of them is how excited the Republicans are about voting. And in fact, the Republican turnout was also super high in 2018. If the Republicans had just had their normal level turnout, Fred Hubbell would be governor of the state right now. And possibly J.D. Scholten would have beaten Steve King. It was just that the Democratic turnout was tremendous, but the Republican turnout was also so high. By historical, compared to past midterm elections. So people's engagement, I think Trump is so polarizing, and it's going to be, again, a high turnout election on both sides, with both Trump's detractors and his admirers. I'm hoping for some Republican fatigue, like maybe some Republicans will just stay home rather than coming out to vote for Trump. To see the younger generation being very socially concerned, being involved in politics, and largely rejecting the Republican Party, that's encouraging. So I tell my teenagers all the time, I can't wait till everyone in your generation is old enough to vote, And I hope you'll save the country from my generation and your generation, frankly. I mean, we've made a mess of things. Things I try to focus on in my looking at the legislative races and the congressional races is you got to think about what the Iowa electorate looks like. Because, for instance, when I hear people say, well, we need candidates who can appeal to young people. And I agree. I mean, I would hope that all of our candidates could appeal to young people, but a lot of these key Iowa House and Senate districts, they don't have a lot of young people. And one of my readers who lives in a smaller Iowa town, he said, 50 is the new 35 in his town. I mean, there just aren't a lot of young people. So it is not to win back some of those seats in the state legislature. We need to do very well among middle-aged or older voters to have any kind of a chance of flipping those seats. You can't, unlike some states like maybe Florida or Virginia, maybe you can build a winning coalition that's more reliant on young people, but the Iowa demographics just don't support that yet, unfortunately. But we still need to mobilize the young people who are here and get them involved. I like to showcase a variety of voices, and so I always want to hear from people. I want to hear from Iowans who have an idea for a story, or if they want to write the story themselves, or if they think it's a topic I might be interested in, if they think of somebody that I should be interviewing or an event that I should be covering. I can't always get to all of those events, but I do really appreciate hearing from people. And I always appreciate if I can't get to an event, but somebody who was there thought it was worthwhile to write up some of the key moments, what people said that was interesting. I love hearing about both success stories and challenges that people are having. So, for instance, somebody who has worked on a successful local effort, I would always love to share their experiences with my readers. I think that I would love for people, if they're looking for ways to get involved, I would love for Iowans to find a local state house or Senate candidate in their area, because you can do so much good on a state legislative race, even whether it's writing a few postcards or knocking on doors or making a few phone calls to get people out to an event. So I would love to encourage people to get involved in that way. And I know right now a lot of people are volunteering for presidential candidates, and that's great. And I don't want to discourage anyone from doing that kind of volunteering. I've been a precinct captain myself, so I recognize the value of that. But we really need to not forget, after the caucuses are over and the presidential candidates leave town, we need to stay engaged, because that's how we win the city council races, the school board races, and eventually getting people into the state legislature, and I hope, at some point replacing this governor who's just doing terrific damage to the state. I'm hoping that people will get involved in their communities. Almost anywhere you live in Iowa, you're close to a competitive state house or Senate race. I mean, they're just all over the state. No one is not within striking distance of one of those legislative races. And all four of our congressional races are going to be competitive. So if we have strong state house candidates, that is also going to help Cindy Axne, the nominee to replace Dave Loebsack, Abby Finkenauer, and J.D. Schulten. They are all going to benefit from any kind of grassroots engagement in progressive campaigns next year. I'm on Facebook. I am on Twitter. My messages are open. There's an about page on my website that has contact information for people who want to reach me by phone or email. But direct messages I always consider confidential, so people don't have to worry that I would publish their names or something if they're just wanting to send a tip or alert me to a story. But people can also contact me for my address. Occasionally people have wanted to send material through the mail that they thought I might be interested in. But I just always enjoy it. Commenting on any of my posts on social media also is a way people can get in touch with me, commenting on the website. So I'm very open to hearing from people. I really appreciate the readers who care enough to keep things going, because I don't have a media corporation behind me. I don't have a marketing department behind me. So I really depend on readers to help. And I've gotten some of my favorite stories have been tips that I got from readers, things that I wouldn't have heard about otherwise.
Nice. Well, hey, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. Great
Thank
job.
you.